Everybody. Oh, there's recording. Okay. So I just before I will read whatever I wrote, I would like to clarify a few points. Kind of, let's say, a motivation for this paper. Rather obvious. The beginning of the war, and this sudden realization that Russia constantly repeats its own path. There is kind of eerie repetition of the same, and it's what actually, let's say, piqued my interest. So it's an overarching question. It's why again? Why again the same repetition? Yeah. So it's one thing I just want to make clear what is this overarching question. And then I have to clarify at least two moments. So I call this paper, let me, whatever I have to share. So it's Reevaluating of Arendt's approach, Hannah Arendt's approach from Nietzsche's perspective, or Genealogy of Imagining Russian National Spirit. So the first moment that I want to clarify, in order to avoid any misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and so on, is the word nihilism. So when I use nihilism, I don't mean nihilism in Jacobian sense or Turgenev sense. I mean nihilism in strictly Nietzschean sense. And again, probably I have to clarify because even Heidegger kind of screw up Nietzsche's sense of nihilism. So Nietzsche quite clearly, I think, expresses in Twilight of the Idols that nihilism is a sick reaction to the earthly value. One rejects earthly value out of his own sickness. So it's the idea that I want to preserve of nihilism, not nihilism as negation of the supreme values. Supreme value is already nihilism for Nietzsche. So for Nietzsche, at least how I read him, Christianity is a paradigmatic nihilism. And Kant's transcendental noumenal is form of nihilism. So it's one thing, and I will come back later on when I'm distinguishing between different types of nihilism in Nietzsche. And the second moment, this word spirit, Russian spirit, I just decided, okay, I will use the word spirit because I don't know what word would be better. So I did not want to use nation, because I want to stay away from any biological or ethnical designation. It does not help. And when I use spirit, it's nothing mystical there should be. When I use word spirit, I use it rather in Hegelian sense, with, let's say, materialistic twist. When I understand spirit as a team spirit. When, I don't know, there is a soccer team, and I know striker depends on defenders and midfield players, and they all work together. It's kind of this bodily working together. And they come to this team through practice. So I look at this Russian spirit as what work out in practice through years of historical development. Okay, I think it's enough as a kind of this warning. in my paper, I would like to start with a reflection on the development of one more warning, because I come to this word. There is terrible word, totalitarian. If I stumble on it, forgive me. So I would like to start with a reflection on the development of totalitarian regime in contemporary Russia from the perspective of Hannah Arendt's The Origin of Totalitarianism. Contemporary Russia, with stubborn persistence, recapitulates all determining phenomena of a totalitarian regime defined by Arendt. While certain historical factors described by Arendt are necessary for the formation of totalitarian regimes, they are not sufficient. I will argue that Arendt's historical analysis should be complemented by Benedict Anderson's study on the formation of the nation state, and Nietzsche's typology. I will proceed to offer a hypothesis on the formation of the Russian national spirit as an essentially nihilistic spirit with pertaining characteristic and mechanism of the slave type, according to Nietzsche. In The Origin of Totalitarianism, Arendt analyzed the origin of the totalitarian regime, the mechanics of their development, and their essential characteristics. Her analysis is based on the totalitarian system in Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. She demonstrates that despite the apparent differences in their ideology, one declared adherence to the ideal of the class struggle, the other to national purity and national supremacy, there are striking similarities. She finds that both countries, despite the same determining phenomena, both countries display the same determining phenomena and were both historically conditioned by similar circumstances. What is remarkable that contemporary Russia consistently and persistently displayed the same determining phenomena despite different historical conditions. Russia, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany inverse and perverse the meaning of nature, politics, life, truth, and human existence. We can observe the same phenomena that shaped the totalitarian regimes in the first half of the 20th century, according to Arendt, replicated by contemporary Russia. The separation from reality and emancipation from experience, which are the essential moments in constituting the totalitarian state. This separation, emancipation, condition forming of the nation and total lie. Forming of the nation on the total lie. The masses believe everything and nothing. Everything is possible and nothing is true. All share that politics is the art of cheating, but the leader is always right. Truth and reality are established and maintained through the politics of opposition by the imagining of objective enemies. One is an enemy not because one does something dangerous in plans to overthrow power, but because he is defined by the policy of the government as dangerous. He is a carrier of a tendency as a carrier of disease. And next, the quote from Hannah Arendt, open quote, practically speaking, totalitarian rule proceeds like a man who persistently insults another man until everybody knows that the latter is his enemy, so that he can, with some plausibility, go and kill him in self-defense. This certainty is a little crude, but it works, as everybody will know. The end of the quote. The rigorous dichotomy between us and them, organized thinking and existence, the nihilistic politics of ressentiment, says the relation and evaluation of this reality. Lie in the contemporary Russia replicates the tendency described by Arendt. It has been thoroughly militarized by the grounding of the greatness of Russia in mythical historical military achievement and the militarization of the system of education. The formalization of the past through dictatorial militaristic control of history fostered further separation from reality. Russia replicates the Soviet Union dream to make fairy tale reality. Сделать сказку былью. This militarization, lawfulness, separation from reality, etc., find their support in the great leader who can never be guilty of wrong, because he is not bound by truth, but operates on the principle of transcendental infallibility. He disseminates not the order of truth, but the order of loyalty. Modern Russia not only exhibits the determining phenomena of the totalitarian regime, but it uses the same mechanism in establishing and maintaining its power. It destroys common sense, replacing it with super sense by using a perverted logic of performance. Only Russian can save orphans. Anybody who suspects that saved children are not orphans is a suspect. The logical conclusion is that children's parents should be eliminated. So kind of, it is probably explanation. So it's Hannah Arendt's argument about this perverted logic of performance. When she explains this argument, she gives an example. Everybody knows in Moscow that the subway exists only in Moscow. If suddenly people in Moscow would discover that there is subway in Paris, what we have to do, we have to bomb Paris in order to destroy subway. So it's Hannah Arendt's example. A little bit fanciful, a little bit exaggerated, but what is eerie, somehow this fanciful example now very easily, Hannah Arendt's fanciful example can be very easily presented by the real life example that was displayed by Putin in his relation to the children. So the next moment is kind of turning moment in what I'm doing, because so far I just was trying to demonstrate that Russia, contemporary Russia, displays the same phenomena, the same mechanism as totalitarian regimes from the 20th century. The next, what is more interesting for me, I want to have this confrontation with Arendt's analysis in order to, let's say, challenge her claim on the origin of the totalitarian regime. However, Arendt's brilliant phenomenological analysis seamlessly assimilates fundamental assumption that could and should be questioned. The purpose of this questioning is to demonstrate a puzzling and persistent confusion of condition and condition in Arendt's analysis. I agree that separation of truth and reality is displayed by totalitarian regimes. However, I'm not sure that her evaluation of the significance of truth and its determining force holds, and that the removal of the lie may threaten totalitarian states. Tashi writes on the power of propaganda. Propaganda and organization no longer suffice to assert that the impossible is possible, that the incredible is true, that the insane consistency rules the world. The cheap psychological support of totalitarian fiction, the active resentment of the status quo, which the masses refuse to accept as the only possible world, is no longer there. Every bit of factual information that leaks through the iron curtain, set up against the ever-threatening flood of reality from the other, non-totalitarian side, is a great menace, totalitarian domination. Then counter-propaganda has been totalitarian movements. So Arendt expresses kind of a very familiar and common sentiment that is still alive. The people in the Soviet Union did not resist Stalin's regime because of the lack of information. If only they knew of all the committed atrocity, they would be appalled and rebel, or at least the veil would fall from their eyes and they would see that they are duped. We can hear the repetition of this sentiment now in dealing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when Putin, Medvedev, and Russian mass media in general blame for duping innocent Russians. This argument is exposed as highly questionable by modern technology. It is self-deceiving to maintain it in the time of the internet. They claim in support of this argument that in distant Russian regions, people do not have access to the internet, or that elderly people do not know how to use the internet, does not constitute any objection. Neither elderly people nor people from the distant provinces determine Russian politics. This argument especially collapses in the view of recent events in the United States. Trump supporters abide by his lie and support the alternative reality despite a mass denunciation of his lie. It would be also naive to maintain that the Soviet Union collapsed because of the leaking of factual information from the West, of the smuggling in the Soviet Union of Solzhenitsyn works, Conquest research, Pasternak's novel, or the influence of Deep Purple and Bonnier. The Soviet Union was not affected by all these leaks, smuggling, and admirable sacrifice of dissidents. The Soviet people's unwavering support for the communist leadership was not affected by these actions either. The people, as usual, just tighten even more their ranks to oppose objective enemies. It seems that we face a paradox. The more is revealed, the less truth is manifested. The more mass media uncovers, the more it covers. Popper calls this the approach displayed by Arendt. There are forces that prevent people to find the truth, and if they would find the truth, they would make the right choice. Yeah, the Popper describes this approach as conspiracy of ignorance. It just doesn't work. This naive belief that there is truth and truth would upset lie is something that should be questioned. Arendt's analysis is based on the assumption that there is truth, it's good, and people want to know truth. But the life in the Soviet Union, contemporary Russia, and recent events in the United States rather support Nietzsche's questioning of the value of truth. Do not people prefer to be duped? Is not the lie itself as well as true, and a preference for it only a symptom of certain type of life and caused by this type of life? Are not truths errors that enhance our life? Nietzsche, in The Light of the Idols, reflects on the mechanism of the confusion of cause and its consequences. He writes, "This young man becomes pale before his time. His friends say, such and such an illness is to be blamed. I say that he became ill, that he did not withstand the illness, was already the consequence of an impoverished life, a hereditary exhaustion. The manipulation of truth, the separation of truth from reality, did not cause the establishment of a totalitarian regime in the Russian or Soviet Empire, did not cause a sickness. The establishment of the totalitarian state is the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union and Russia was the consequence of its impoverished life, a hereditary exhaustion. We can trade a similar confusion in Arendt's claim that totalitarian regimes are anti-totalitarian and maintained by establishing objective enemies. In support of her claim, Arendt referred to Stalin's anti-Semitic policy after the war. She argues that he maintained his society-destroying policy for the sake of totalitarian regime. She is right in her estimate of the damaging effect of this politic for societal health. It seemed that Stalin himself became a victim of his anti-Semitic policy when a doctor dared to check on him for a prolonged period. But Arendt ignores the innate motivation of the Soviet people who enthusiastically supported anti-Semitic policies. The enthusiasm for denunciation of Jews and demand for their persecution were so sincere, massive, and overwhelming among workers, peasants, and the intelligentsia that Stalin found it necessary at some point to curb their enthusiasm. Stalin did not invent new objective enemies. He only allowed the Russian pathological spirit, a particular type of life, to vent its will where it was already predisposed to go. I would like to argue question this confusion that Stalin was able to consistently maintain mythologization of reality, militarization, residual dichotomy, invention of objective enemies, primacy of loyalty over laws, etc. And Putin is able to do the same, not because of the separation of the Russian from the real sources of truth, and not because of the efforts of the secret police in upholding the super-sensible reason of the totalitarian movement, but because the resentful dichotomy is constitutive for Russian state spirit. It is its innate characteristic. The resentful dichotomy in its truth demands the invention of enemies and effigy, worshipping of the supersensible, and is sustained by his invention and his worship. It finds itself at home in a totalitarian regime. To examine the constitution of Russian spirit, I also would like to address Arendt's argument that the maintenance of the life depends on the Russian lack of memory. She writes, opening of the quote, "Finally, as for gift of memory, so dangerous to totalitarian rule, foreign observers feel that if it's true that the elephants never forget, Russians seem to us be the very opposite of elephants. Soviet Russian psychology seems to make forgetfulness really possible. Contemporary Russians are not elephants either. From the explanation of the action of green people in Crimea to Putin's ever-changing explanation of the causes of the SVO, we can see the incredible exhibition of the lack of memory and its importance for Putin to maintain his reality. My concern is whether this phenomenon is produced by the totalitarian state or inherent to certain types of spirit, and whether Arendt, despite her constant use of Nietzsche in her work, confuses two different systems, memory and forgetfulness, ignore the phenomenon of screen memory. I think we can have a better understanding of the significance of lie and of the invention of objective enemies, of supersensible lawfulness, etc., if we follow Nietzsche's explanation of forgetfulness as the primary mechanism that creates the possibility for the constituting of memory, which is a condition for the creation of juridical person. Arendt presents lawfulness as one of the primary and distinguishing phenomena of the totalitarian state. Totalitarianism develops a mechanism for the killing of juridical person and creates arbitrary legal system that destroy political and civil rights. However, the persistence of this phenomena in pre-revolutionary Russia, in the Soviet Union, post-Soviet Union Russia, makes the argument that this phenomena is a product in work of a totalitarian movement questionable. Bogdan Kisikovsky, in a seminal collection examining the Russian mentality, Vekhi, already addressed Russian inherent illegality before the revolution as a worrisome problem. In his analysis of Russian national idiosyncrasy, he discusses the same phenomena that Arendt finds indicative for a totalitarian state in the middle of the 20th century. If you follow Kisikovsky's argument, Stalin did not kill a juridical person in the Russian people. A juridical person was never born in Russia. To form a legal person, one needs to maintain memory. But to maintain memory, one needs to be able to forget. So, and next, it's again kind of aside, but a necessary aside to clarify This double chamber in Nietzsche, the mechanism of forgetting and remembering. So before continuing with my hypothetical outline of the constitution of the Russian nation, I would like to make a few clarification and distinction following Nietzsche's arguments. There is reactive memory that is formed as a result of a broken digestive system, inability to forget. So for Nietzsche, an ability to forget is just, it's a bring indigestion, and then everything just a reaction to my indigestion. It's a pathological, and the pathological inability to forget makes one reactive. One creates a reactive stories, myths, as a reaction to the wounds of the past that never heal. Reactive men or men of resentment call these myths history, which they need to make their suffering meaningful. Memory in this case is a mode of recollection of what never existed. The second type, or second mechanism in this two-chamber mechanism is memory, active memory. It's formed to make one remember, to make one calculable, reliable, to make one's action legal. The history created by calculable man as a projection into future their fluence. Its purpose is to reaffirm the creative position of imagination. It is an aesthetic game to foster the art of living. One has to forget the past in order to make room for affirming history. On the basis of this distinction between reactive and active memory, there is a distinction between two types of nihilism in Nietzsche. The first type is essentially sickening nihilism that cannot act. It only reacts to the past that never existed. The second type determines its own end in the dialectical. The second type, active type, determines its own end in the dialectical revaluation of its values. In both cases, historiography as well as memory are some types of mythologization. There is neither the original cause nor the original event hidden in the past that initiate and originate authentic or non-authentic history. An event is unfolding, and its unfolding interprets itself, its sources and its consequences. All memories are created memories in the absence of primal memory. To approach memory, history, or truth, we have to ask, whose memory or truth for whom? Or from what perspective the memory, history, or truth are presented. Nietzsche could agree with Marxist historian Pokrovsky. History is a politic turn backward. However, he would agree with a caveat. History is a practical reasoning turned backward. When practical should be understood in Kantian way. Cognition and reasoning are determined by my practical involvement with life. The birth of the European nations at the beginning of the 19th century was the expression of their will to power. Their will was shaped in wrestling matches between Hobbes, Rousseau, Locke, Voltaire, etc. Kant did not invent autonomous will. His autonomous will expressed the practical being of the European spirit, a way of thinking and conducting its relationship. The formation of European nation is determined by the idea of the categorical imperative in struggle with it. The practical attitude is the culmination of the forming of a calculable animal in Nietzsche, is the highest manifestation of active nihilism. It's a necessary step by overcoming nihilism and transforming universal categorical imperative into individual categorical imperative. Russia never got there. It seemed that Russia skipped this process. Russia did not go for the struggle of enlightenment. Its practical attitude is defined by the traditional imperial slavehood that bears all marks of the reactive nihilism. Russian spirit does not act. It reacts to its wounds. Maybe Dostoevsky underground man is the clearest expression of this spirit. He feels himself as if without skin, pained by air. I would like in the rest of my paper to appraise the formulated question and suggestion by tracing a hypothetical outline of the constitution of the Russian nation. To trace the birth of Russian nation, I'd like to supplement Arendt's analysis of the birth of nationalism with Benedict Anderson's account of the origin of a nation. Anderson, in his analysis, concentrates on cultural idiosyncrasies in the formation of natural cultural identity let me drink water. In contradistinction to Arendt's focus on exploring common political and economic conditions for forming national state in the modern world. Russia and many other countries in Europe and America, as Benedict Anderson argues, in emergent communities, were forming imaginary communities of nations at the end of the 18th century. The major factor in forming imaginary national communities, according to Anderson, were print, dissemination of print materials, and the creation and unification of vernacular language. The success of this dissemination depended on the level of literacy of a forming community. At the beginning of the 19th century, Karamzin, the first influential Russian historian, started the publication of his history of the Russian state. His contemporary, a notable adventurer who probably in our time would be a great influencer, Fyodor Tolstoy exclaims after reading Karamzin's history, "Оказывается, у меня есть отечество. Apparently, I have a fatherland." The Russian nation was imagined and inaugurated by Karamzin's history. Russia, at the moment of forming an imaginary community, was in a peculiar situation. The literacy rate in the United States at the beginning of the 19th century was about 40%. In European countries, around 50%. Russia joined the process of forming of national state when only 3% of its population was literate. The most popular magazine published by Karamzin at the end of the 18th century in Moscow had 210 subscribers. It was considered a respectable number. In Europe, magazine at the time had thousands of subscribers. The publication of Karamzin's history beat all imaginable records in the Russian publishing business at the beginning of the 19th century, 3,000 copies. For comparison, Martin Luther's work, essential for the formation of the German nation, sold more than 3 million copies in the middle of the 16th century. The Russian nation, from the beginning, was a peculiar construction. It was lagging behind, and it was not based on the recognition by folks through the power of print and dissemination of printed words. The unifying imaginary community for which they are ready to die. It was based on Karamzin ventriloquizing of the voices of the past, which was then assimilated by the Socratic community for whom Russian was a second language. This ventriloquizing shaped the pattern for the image of Russian nation as a military heroic nation that always fight for the right cause. This right cause, according to Karamzin, is the enlargement of the state and its fortification. As a result, any cause that leads to expansion and enforcement is the right cause. These heroic people had a mission to spread their notion of justice, to expand their territory. Everybody who opposes this conquering the people on the border were evil. Messianism and invasion of enemies out of necessity is the Russian secret destiny. Karamzin ventriloquized not only the justification of eternal Russian expansion politics, the opposition to objective enemies, and Russian messianism, but the necessity of serfdom. Russian peasants are illiterate brutes. They cannot govern themselves on their own. They need a strong hand to be gathered. Karamzin's paradigm and its general acceptance become the pattern for the consequent imagining of the Russian nation. A heroic, messianic people surrounded by enemies and who were traumatized by a cruel leader at some point. This formation was complemented by Ovar's idea of official Russification. The Russian nation was imagined and conceptualized by liberal aristocrats at the beginning of the 19th century and developed by Russian conservative officials and the so-called intelligentsia in the second half of the 19th century. These groups play something of the role of priest from Nietzsche genealogy for Russian slaves. They invented imaginary causes to explain the impoverished state of life and gave reason for somebody to be blamed for this state of life. The difference between liberal aristocrats and conservative officials and the intelligentsia were roughly represented in the second half of the 19th century as Slavophiles and Westerners. In both ideologies, the Russian nation was surrounded by internal and external enemies that prevented it from the realization of its messianic greatness. In both cases, the nation was formed in reference to an undigestible and unforgettable past. Karamzin, the 9th volume of his history, exposes the meaningless atrocity of Ivan the Terrible. The image of Ivan the Terrible, his atrocity, and the reaction to the memory of this atrocity, the trauma that should be screened but never could be processed, constituted the pattern of the pathological forming of screen memories. Karamzin 9th volume, its acceptance and rejection were active moments in the formation of the reactive nihilistic Russian mentality, and they are a symptom of its indigestion. The inability to forget and digest the past in Karamzin has been a symptom of Russian historiography. This inability stifled the development of memory instrumental for forming the will, which is essential for forming a juridical person. Now, quotation from Nietzsche, so that a world of strange new things, circumstances, even acts of will may be placed quite safely in between the original I will, I shall do, and the actual discharge of the will. It's act without breaking this long change of the will. One needs will's memory to distinguish between what happens by accident and what by design, to think casually, to view the future as the present anticipated, to grasp with certainty what is end and what is means. In all, to be able to calculate, compute, and before he can do this, man himself will really have to become reliable. From the 19th century to the present day, we can witness the doubling reflection of Slavophiles and Westerners. They have different objective enemies to blame for Russian failure and different views on the unforgettable past. But they are united by being determined by their imagined objective enemies and their inability to forget a past that festered and determined them only in direction of revenge. For Slavophiles, it was Tatars and Peter the Great. For Westerners, there were the same Tatars, Ivan, forming of despotic Tsarist autocracy of serfdom, etc. The inability to forget turns one into a vengeful spirit who always fight against against one's past. This inability prevents one from forming a legal memory. This unforgettable past was also used to explain and excuse the apparent failure of the Russian nation. One of the revealing examples of this mirroring nihilistic ideology is Vechy, a collection of works by the former Marxists who were turned to Slavophile ideology after the apparent cruelty of the first revolution. All of them were attentive and honest symptomologists. In their explanation of the cruelty and failure of the first Russian Revolution, we can recognize with an eerie sensation the phenomena of the totalitarian regime outlined by Arendt. However, all these symptoms could be summarized otherwise as symptoms of the slave nihilistic mentality, according to Nietzsche typology. The authors of the magazine, despite the great symptomology, replicated in their offer the treatment of the revolutionary and post-revolutionary sickness the same resentful slave mentality. They designate as objective enemies Western ideas and the intelligentsia as their carriers. They found an unforgettable path to exculpate an unimaginable nation of Russian people from accusation of cruelty. Even when Michael Gershenzon admits the dangerous, destructive, nihilistic, and cruel power of Russian folks, which was thankfully restricted by the police forces, he exculpates Russian folks. Almost all of the writers opposed to the intelligence and image of the innocent, sacred Russian folks who are really understood by Slavophiles and the great Russian writer Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Incidentally, their belief in Russian inherent sacred Christian spirituality were shattered by history, by the events that unfolded after the October Revolution. They created a myth about the exhibition of the imagined great Russian folk soul in these after in Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. They fell prey to their own myth and spread it for future readers. The reading of these authors' novel was too much affected by these after propagandistic journalism. There are few genuine Russian folk in either author's novel, and their portrayal are not flattering. In Dostoevsky, it seems the most outstanding example of Russian folk is Mikolka from Crime and Punishment, who haunts Raskolnikov's dream. Mikolka's senseless beating of his horse, another folk's reaction to his beating, lending a helping hand in beating, laughing or being silent, could be an appropriate metaphor for Russian action in Ukraine and the reaction of the majority of Russians to this invasion. Tolstoy Platon Karataev, highly praised by the lover of the Russian soul, is an example of nihilistic slave mentality, the formation of so-called new Soviet human, who was the completion of the project of the forming of an imaginary Russian nation in the beginning of the 19th century. Karataev is a premonition of the future new specimen of man, a man reduced to a bundle of the most elementary reaction, as Pavlov's dogs, that can always be liquidated and replaced by other bundles of reaction that behave in exactly the same way. Karataev is a paradigmatic example of a man who does not have active memory and could not be turned into a juridical person. He who, according to all lovers of Russian spirit, represent the best quality of Russian simple folks, is the model of citizen of the totalitarian state. Pyotr Bezukhov imagined that Karataev taught him a Schopenhauerian lesson, an abolition of the will within itself as the path to what is ethically good, and ultimately to a kind of resigned mystical salvation. But Schopenhauerian mystical offers only a pleasing cover to Karataev as a bundle of sensation. We witnessed the haunting vociferous recurrence of the Slavophile Western opposition during Perestroika. The opposition never really disappeared. It was simmering, reduced to the literary opposition between city and village prose. It was presented as an opposition between memorial and pamять. In English, the mirroring of this opposition is poetic and ridiculous, or ridiculous, depending on one's sensitivity. Memorial and memory. Memorial and memory. The indigestible, unforgettable past that defines the present for them was Stalin's era. The admirable work of the researcher from Memorial was driven by the necessity to reveal the truth about Stalin's criminal cruelty. The sacred mission was animated by the idea that if the Russian people who oddly adored Stalin in opposition to Brezhnev since the end of the 70s would know the truth about Stalin, they would abhor him and would never fall prey to totalitarian regime. They reckon that the Russian people's admiration for Stalin, despite the Khrushchev's era's revelation, was possible because the revelation and the initiation were partial and were never concluded. They were animated by the same admirable idea as Arendt's analysis, by the same conspiracy of ignorance. The totalitarian regime can be brought down by the revelation of truth. Climate resentfully shaped itself against the other indigestible, Western culture, and especially Jewish influence that spoiled the purity of the sacred Russian spirit. In almost incredible twist, after the years of revelation about Stalin's totalitarian regime, the Russian people have come back to admire him. After the exodus of Jews from Russia, Russian nationalists still blame Jews for all ills. We witness the same pattern. The Russian spirit can maintain itself only by inventing an enemy in effigy. Now it invented a new enemy, almost from nowhere, LGBTQ. Stalin and his totalitarian regime were only symptoms that revealed the constituting forces of the Russian spirit. It is inherently nihilistic, revengeful spirit affected by dyspepsia, which prevents the formation of legal memory and juridical individuality. Direction, meaning of action, and answer to the question, what to be done, are defined by negating an imagined enemy, by answering to the question, whom to blame. Hannah Arendt, in her brilliant description of the phenomena of totalitarian regimes, presents symptoms of Russian sickness. Neither Stalin nor Putin caused the formation of the totalitarian regime. They were symptoms of the Russian spirit of resentment, which operate as any reactive nihilistic spirit by separating the actor from acting. Stalin and Putin are criminal characters, but the only actors that are played by reactive nihilistic force, the Russian national spirit. The people of the Soviet Union and Russia were victims of the totalitarian regime, which was their creation. Okay, that's about it.
Thank you, Maksim, for
I hope I did not bore you to death.
the inspired and very interesting presentation. And let's start our discussion. Questions, reactions, opposition. Nadia, please. Nadia Kazachenko, Кривой Риг.
Oh, sorry, it was just applause, but really, thank you very much for this interesting report. This is a very difficult issue, which requires the analysis of various fields, history and political science, philosophy, and even psychology. It is a truly inexhaustible field of research, and perhaps it will be this kind of research that will bring us closer to an understanding of the contemporary events. It seems to me that an important part of the Russian spirit is suffering. Something like the idea that the unrecognized sufferer brings us closer to a brighter future. We often hear Russian people of the older generation say, "Never have we lived well. There is no point in starting." How do you assess this possible willingness to suffer in the context of the Russian national spirit and maybe in the sense of totalitarianism? Thank you.
Yes, the suffering is innate characteristic, but is the cause of sickness. In a sense, it's a choice to suffer. That is just not exactly a choice. No, is the consequence of this exhausted, sick spirit. There is nothing glorious in suffering. Suffering is not, I try to remember Nietzsche quotation. Suffering does not entitle you to truth. Suffering is just a form of sickness. Yeah, and it's basically what I want to demonstrate. That sickness comes from trauma, and I did not try to go to a region of trauma. but it's a traumatized spirit. Whether it's trauma, it's a cheap shot, Tatar-Mongolian, or it's a trauma of constantly lagging behind Europe. But it's a traumatized nation. That does not make it glorious.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christoph Lumer, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting conference. I have a question because I'm not familiar with this kind of analysis, and so I'm very curious what you can make positively out of it. So, what are the ways out? Is there any line of thought, any help which you would propose with this kind of analysis? So, as it sounded to me so far, it's something which happens and we are deeply in, and so it seems to be all something dark where we cannot find an exit. So is there something positive in your analysis?
Yeah, not much. But one kind of, I would say, what is the practical application of it? Yeah, I would say at least first we have to get rid of an illusion that there is one little malicious spirit whose name is Putin, or maybe some other people around him. And if we would remove Putin, everything would be wonderful. No, it would not happen. There is a country that is deeply infected by its practice of life. Yeah. The second, again, it's kind of using Karl Popper, and I think he's quite good at it, to imagine that we can control, we can change intentionally something. It's another illusion. At best, what we can think about how to prevent the development of this country from getting worse. It's all that there could be, the creating mechanism from further deterioration. And I think there are such possibilities. But it's all that could be done.
That's rather negative, I would say. So
yeah, no, but there is no magical tool. It would be wonderful when Sakharov's offered his new constitution, Russia should be divided in separate, like something like states, and yeah, it would be wonderful. But I don't see how it could be done in this situation. And just prevention of the further deterioration, it's all that I can do as or can see as a practical steps.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tatiana Gardashuk, please.
Thank you so much for our lecture today, this very interesting and special insight to the problem of Russian mentality and roots of Russian totalitarian way of thinking and world perception and attitude to the world. And I just want to comment Nadia Kozachenko questions about suffering as an essence of Russian soul, Russian enigma of Russian soul. But from my point of view, the Russian soul suffer most from the fact that others don't suffer. And we see this, and we were able to see this from the Russian occupiers' talks with their relatives, friends, and somebody else in Russia when they invaded Ukraine during the first days. The main question, they were completely angry and asked who allows this hochlam or Ukrainian, simple Ukrainians to live so nice. So it was such, and many atrocities they performed in Bucha, Irpin, other places, where Chernihiv region, were just the reaction on the level of life of ordinary people in Ukraine. It's my conclusion from the observation of things were going on during this war. And this is also a responsibility of Russian culture, Russian literature for cultivating this feeling of suffering, this ideal of suffering as some kind of good.
I can concur just, yes. So what you said, that suffering as the moment of identity, and it's, again, the underground man expresses it quite well. I'm sick, я болен, and I only can get identity through sickening myself further. So yeah, the moment when somebody, as I said, the sickening comes from this lagging behind. When I see somebody that lives better, he becomes my enemies, and I identify myself in reaction to him. I don't have my own identity. My identity is only created by reaction to another. So it's kind of the idea that they need objective enemies. It's not like objective enemies kind of appear. The objective enemies should be invented in order for me to feel suffering, because from suffering, I get my identity. If I'm not suffering, who am I? So it's kind of this logic of nihilism that I want to expose.
Thank you. Thank you. Continue our discussion. Katerina Karpenko, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your very interesting report, very topical, really problem. I was interested in the last moment of your presentation, your speech. I was ready to hear the continuation of this correlation between the system of memory and forgetfulness as a way to legal memory. You, in brackets, memory, but the next step is the means for the legal memory as a means for juridical person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the last words, your last sentence of presentation was about criminal person. This is my question. The way as for manipulation between memory and forgetfulness, it's to legal memory and then to a juridical person. But this way, because we are witnesses of situation in United Nations assemblies when, for example, Russia makes other nations to discuss questions which looks like legal or criminal. They blame Ukraine in criminal, for example, even ecological activity, ecological actions against Russia. This is a way between, for example, one time I told to my German colleagues that one joke from this that Russia is the country with unpredictable past. Because in different situations, different historical tones, they try to something from past and to manipulate with this memory from past. Not remember, not forget, but to interpret and to manipulate in this situation. Okay, this way is clear, for example, how they can create juridical person. But you're right, I agree with you that also there is a predictable, very logical, it's criminal logic maybe. How can they predict, how can we understand this logic of criminalization, of personal responsibility or social responsibility or national responsibility? Maybe I have got question this for me, because we need to find the way to disclose this procedure, because we may think about future situation when we will wait for responsibility of Putin, of other persons, and we need to develop, you can say something about this procedure. What is the secret of this procedure? Do you know this secret?
I don't know secrets. Usually there are no secrets. We're just ignorant. I don't know. So there is a juridical person definitely created in European countries, and according to this juridical person, Putin is criminal. And what you're right, in Russia there is just the absence of the understanding of legality. Legality is always used in order to serve a certain purpose. In a sense, in Russia, since never legality was formed, they take to extreme Trasimov's claim in Plato's Republic. Justice is the advantage of the stronger. They take it to extreme and they accept it as a national politic. Or it was formulated by Lenin nicely. Marxist theory is right because it's victorious. The one who victorious is right, and it's just the dominant politics in Russia. It's completely, in a sense, it lacks the legal sense. But how to make Russians into legal person? I don't know.
Yeah. How can we claim that this is a criminal person? This is a juridical person. What is the difference between these two kinds?
Different between criminal person and juridical person?
Yeah.
It's rather, I'm not sure I can answer this question, because it will take us far into different field. Because then we have to think about what makes one criminal according to what legal system. No, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm ready to answer this question.
Okay, if we will discuss about, for example, we will have some court procedure and we will conclude about wrong history, wrong attitude to the historical process. Is it possible or no?
it's still very contextual. And just we have to speak about different contexts and different legal systems here.
Yeah.
Kind of my argument is not what legal system is right. And after all, every legal system is contextual. There is no absolute justice. There is no absolute legality. The problem is that there was no formation of juridical person in Russia. There is no sense of legality. It's rather the problem.
Thank you.
The rest are just not sure.
Thank you. Alexander Kulik, please. Your
Oh,
question.
thank you for really interesting and deep presentation. I have the following question. Is it possible to transform Russian spirit to remove imperialistic components of it? What do you think about it?
Militaristic component is a part of this economic spirit. So we cannot just, I don't think we just can remove a component. It's not accidental, it's inimic to the system. But how to treat Russian spirit? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just at best try to see symptoms and possible diagnosis. No, basically, as I said before, at best, what we can speak about is the minimization of damage. The rest is hard to predict.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Any? Yes, Yaroslav, please.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, for interesting presentation. A lot of problem you are actualize. It's very interesting for me in this context, the problem of the specificity of Russian totalitarianism and the role of origins of Russian totalitarianism. It's very interesting for me to understand the role of some concepts. For example, the role of the concept of Carl Schmitt, the politics of friend and enemy in the conceptualization of Russian totalitarianism. What's your opinion? You agree with the position, the policy of Vladimir Putin connected with some ideal of Schmitt's ideology, Schmitt conceptualization, connected with the link between foreign policy on the one hand and internal policy on the other hand. It's very interesting for me which way to conceptualize the political aspects in the policy of totalitarian regime of Vladimir Putin. What's your position?
Yeah, that's yeah, it's that's a great question, but the first reaction to say neither. I think there is an exaggeration that Putin has a policy. It's kind of one of the points that I want to get through, and I think Carl Schmitt, any exaggeration of political leader or the role of political leader, I think it kind of askew. So the idea that he has an intention and he acts on intention, and then everything happens or not happens according to his intention, whether it's from internal to external or vice versa, I think it's off. It's another conspiracy theory that there is a power and this power can be actualized intention. So I rather would see this again from Nietzschean way, there different will to power. and they're just in constant interplay. So I would say kind of Putin did not really intend it. It just happened. That of course does not kind of in any way exonerate him from what happened. He's just part of this play of forces. I hope I answered to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your position. It's interesting. And second question, if you don't mind, it's very interesting for me, the role of historical memory. It's the hot historical memory in the context of Russian invasion, in the context of Russian policy. What's your opinion in this context? What's the role of historical memory? It's a real historical memory or simulation of historical memory?
No, it's what I argue. It's kind of, again, I just rather make it even more provocative. Every memory is an invention. There is no primal memory. Sooner we have to ask from what perspective the memory is created. And there are two perspectives. It's from reactive perspective or active perspective. And Russian memory, it's always a reaction. It's created out of the reactive perspective. It's always a mythical past that never existed.
It's possible in this context about the memory as a European phenomenon of memory. It's possible in this context to speak about the memory of nations. It's possible to treat Russia as a nation. Or in the European sense of this context.
Yeah, but just as I said, kind of Russia was going through the similar process, imagining of nation, because again, I'm using Anderson argument. Forming of the nation is imagining of the nation for which you can die, and the problem is that European nations, when they were formed by the most of the people who were participating in this process. It's a simple point of literacy. When 50% was literate and the language and the literature was spread between them, it was formed the nation. They were reading the same newspaper. They were reading the same book. Yeah. In Russia, no, it happened in a very artificial kind of a broken way. There was, since the beginning, a huge internal opposition. There were the mute folks that were invented as this great Russian soul or whatever. And there were 3% that were inventing. So it was a Russian nation, but it was already kind of invented or imagined in a very, very broken way.
Okay, it's very interesting in this context. It is possible for you to separate some aspects in the historical discourse of Russia. I mean, theoretical discourse on the one hand, the practical historical discourse on the other hand, and the role of social imagination in these contexts. What's the role of social imagination?
I don't think
in the context of okay, that.
I'm sorry. I don't think that could be completely separate. Social imagination is the foundation for everything else. Or social imagination that is formed by social practice, and then the rest is just kind of unwittingly development of this social imagination. Kind of it's an illusion that we can stand above this imagination, whether we again, taking the Popper's way or Gadamer's way, I cannot get out of this social imagination to which I belonged.
Okay, in the context of Russian invasion, in the context of Russian policy now, we can speak about the unification. On the one hand, theoretical discourse or elite discourse. On the other hand, the historical discourse and the level of social imagination. It's possible about the unification in this context.
Unification is possible, but yeah, there is unification with some, of course, some diversion, but there is still kind of grounding in this social imagination. But there were notes there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure. Maybe what do you mean theoretical? And you said theoretical and history and history. I'm sorry, just
yes, about theoretical discourse. Yes,
theoretical discourse. So
about
historiography and historical unfolding.
Yeah.
No, I still kind of if there it's the point of there are always something on margins. There are always exceptions, yes, but still, I think when we speak about nation, it's what I kind of said at the beginning. We speak about Russian spirit, or speak about Russia. It's a spirit as a team spirit. And basically, when we play together, we already don't notice that we belong to the same community. But there are always something on the margin, some opposition, but even this opposition, in a sense, they play alone. Again, kind of to take example of Navalny, with all his opposition, he supported invasion. That was kind of how. But he plays on that team.
Okay.
Or play.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Svetlana Ovcharenko, please.
Okay, I thank you. I agree with you that that social imagination is very important for us. And now you describe very constant that nation is something like team. But now in our society, in our world, we have teams with different bases. And you describe us one team with totalitarian basis. So how we can evaluate, how we can assess which nation is more important or more reliable, or why one type of nation do something against other type of nation without totalitarian basis, or you think that only totalitarian is a great and eligible and important mark of nation. So, because we just have a neighbor with totalitarian national position, and we as Ukrainians want to be the separate nation with other base. How we can be only neighbors but not enemies?
No, so I'm not sure there were. I think I need some verification. So the question about how two nations could be just neighbors, yeah, not enemies.
Because you tell us that you don't know how to treat Russians nation. Okay, so in European, all Russians will be the same in the many years in future. So it's your choice. Of course, you may be totalitarian nation with specific Russian spirit. It's good, but we want to be other nation, and it's not some. It's our choice to be nation with other spirit, not Russian.
Yeah. I don't say that totalitarian regime is good or Russian spirit is good. I do not claim that. Rather opposite. And it's kind of the same question: how to oppose Russia. I don't know. I just don't know. At best, I can say what there is, but I cannot say what should be done. It's out of my hands.
So we will have a long war.
Quite possibly, yes. I'm not a prophet. I cannot say what there will be. As I said, I only can offer a hypothesis for the origin of this totalitarian spirit. And kind of only can add is just none of the nation is free from that. These nihilistic tendencies are present everywhere, especially reactive nihilistic. We've witnessed it in the United States. It's quite strong. Trump is just representative of this spirit. And I'm pretty sure in Ukraine too is quite strong reactive nihilism. It rather depends on the dominance. It's a part of every developed of every nation, but what to do? Sorry, I don't know.
So you claim that that a Russian spirit is not especially Russian spirit.
No. I speak about reactive nihilistic spirit. There are two types: reactive nihilism and active nihilism. In both cases, we speak about nihilism. And the difference in all countries, these tendencies are present. It all depends which tendency dominates.
Okay, but United Nations spirit now, if you treat nihilistic like self independence, like self assessment, they want to create boundaries around his own world, but not invade other world. So why Russian cannot be totalitarian, nihilistic, and so on in his own boundaries, in its own boundaries?
Because the principle of nihilism, I only can identify myself. I can define myself, I can get sense of myself, the value of myself by negating the other. I need to negate the other. Otherwise, I'm nobody. It's kind of it's a psychological structure of nihilistic spirit.
But every philosophical theory, only one way of treat something in reality. And nihilistic theory of let me this name. Nihilistic treatment is not only possible way of treat our world. And I don't need to be nihilistic. It's not my destiny to be nihilistic. I could be nihilistic, or I couldn't be nihilistic.
There is a rap. When you say I don't want to be nihilistic, you're already nihilistic.
Yes. And and all contemporary nations consist from very different political and social position, and maybe we can understand Russia through the other lessons, through the other point of view.
Oh, of course. It's I do not insist that it's only one possible point of view. It's just a hypothesis, nothing else. I do not even dare to claim that, oh, I explain everything. No, it was a little hypothesis, nothing else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Katerina Karpenko, have a new question.
Very brief, not remark question about correlation between nihilism and violence. Is because you claim, say about nihilism, so neutral your attitude, but it differs. There are different nihilisms. Can we say about nihilism which can proclaim, defend, or share the violence?
The connection between nihilism and violence?
If there is nihilism and totalitarianism, nihilism and violence, nihilism and...
Yeah, there is definitely a very, very clear connection between nihilism and violence. It just, again, kind of referring to the one presentation that I was on, violence is the part of life. It's indispensable. It depends how it's done and from what perspective. Nihilism is always violence. The development of history is always violence. It would be, again, naive to imagine that we can have non-violent development. Again, it's a kind of a general, but yeah, nihilism, it's always, whether we speak about reactive or active, it's always rejecting the other. So it's, I don't know, kind of from Montaigne, there is my place under the sun. By saying that, I already reject everybody else. Even kind of Kant's categorical imperative, kind of Nietzsche calls it's violent cruelty, because I begin to reject myself. So no, they come together, but them is just, the conversation should be deeper. What type of violence and so on.
Thank you. Today our discussion is now more than 1 hour, more than half hour. We are talking today. We are discussing this interesting and very important question. Maybe you have something new. I would like to ask and to give some remarks. Really, it's very interesting discussion today. I feel some intensive thinking in double optics. From one point of view, it's very interesting to follow for the content of your presentation, Russian spirit and some dangerous effects of this from one point of view. From second point of view, it's very interesting to understand, to think about philosophy of history, epistemology of history, hermeneutic of history that are related to this kind of problem. As for me today, many challenges for understanding of the history. For example, how to combine in one model of the philosophy of the history some invasion, violence, totalitarianism, from one point of view, from the second, imagination, memory, forgetfulness, sentiment, literacy, all of these complex phenomena, how to combine together and to create something practical, something useful for understanding of this process. It's my remark, it's my notes, but not so as a question. But if you have some ideas about this type of new historical discourse, at the time of your presentation, there were many questions, many remarks about, but how to combine this new vision of the history together, maybe some notes and some remarks. And no, maybe stop here. Complexity of the problem and relevant type of the historical and philosophical discourse of history.
How to combine all of that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
not so
sure.
combined to how to correlate this problem
They're all correlated, all these pieces always correlated, and probably none of them should have a primacy. The one of kind of problems, and again I could be wrong, it's try to be deep. It's better to learn to see what is on the surface, and all these phenomena is what we have on the surface. So otherwise, the kind of phenomenological view. I'm not sure. So first, I'm not sure I'm getting your question. Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm replying right. Probably replying to what I hear. This is palimpsest, and culture is not just a culture of some deep spiritual movement. Spirit is this palimpsest of different phenomena. And then at best we can do description.
Thank you for palimpsest as a cognitive metaphor of our understanding of the history, and not only history, but spirit, life, and many, many phenomena. Thank you. Thank you
everybody for the questions, by the way. I kind of miss it.
Thank you so much. All participants of our seminar today were very active, they add many important points to these problems, and I suppose it will be very interesting and fruitful seminar. Thank you so much. I would like to meet you again at the beginning or at the middle or at the end of March. At the beginning of the spring, we will meet each other together, and we will continue to our discussion. Postscriptum and seminar will be continued. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
job.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ina. Thank you very much, Maxim, and everyone as well.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Ellen, question or something else?
Ні, чи можу я запропонувати свій виступ на наступний раз?
Yeah.
В кінці дня? Це буде
Yes, of course.
joint common work with my colleagues from Житомир, but I will present it.
Yes,
Okay.
Ellen. Next time, yeah? Next seminar. Yes, Helen, you know, I dream about these questions for you because I'm going to write you a letter with invitation to our next seminar. We talk about at the time of our meeting in the Paderborn, and I remember that you're going to be ready at the beginning of the spring. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
It's a very good idea. Let's continue to our show must go on. Yeah.
You're right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm. Bye.
Tatiana, your mic is off.
So I just thanks one again to Ina for her efforts in organizing these seminars, communication, networking, and of course to you. I just wish everyone a safe, good evening and safe stay.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Thank you.
It was very interesting.
Здравствуй, Victor.
Thanks a lot for the happiness of meeting with Maxim, because this year, maybe 30 years, I haven't any possibilities to watch how he is in a contemporary situation. Maxim, it was very interesting and happiness for me to see you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And
I missed you when I came to Odessa somewhere in
Uh-huh.
2000.
no, but I was at this times in Europe. Оксану Литвину I have seen in Odessa, but not you.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
But Maxim come back to Ukrainian, contemporary Ukrainian context. Yeah. Your reports, your papers, your presentation, it's very welcome, please. It's very important for us.
Кстати, Максим, а этот текст опубликован или нет?
Нет, я все работаю над ним.
Да? Ну, я мог бы вот сейчас в доксе опубликовать, если хочешь.
І ми хочемо в доксі.
Будь ласка, всі до докси.
А ви до нас в актуальні
до
проблеми
вас.
духовності. Будь ласка.
Так. Скажіть, будь ласка, пані Надії, а коли у вас терміни наступні? Коли подавати статті?
До 1 серпня. До 1 серпня. Ми щорічник, тому ми до 1 серпня.
Ой, які ж ви лагідні. Ой, як це чудово.
А ви ж знаєте, що я взагалі дуже лагідна. Поки вертаюсь, поки рецензентів знаходжу.
Бо ми з вами земляки, ми лагідні. Ті, хто живе, ті, хто з Кривого Рогу, ті лагідні, так? І ласкаві. Ось. А, до речі, для Максима, журнал Philosophy of Mind чи актуальні проблеми духовності, тут увага до філософії історії, ось до таких побудов теоретичних, дуже велика. Тому Це вітається, правда? Ваш журнал – це взагалі ваша школа в Кривому Розі з Ярославом Шрамко. Це одна з найкращих шкіл, яка працює над розумінням історії. Так, вже так нашою мовою. І тут буде дуже доречно.
Дякую вам.
Так. І запрошую дуже.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not switching to Ukrainian. I'm a little bit
Try to, yes.
ashamed of it. Just I
You
never
are
was a
welcome
good
to-
student of Ukrainian language, and now I feel kind of bad, but it's all I can do.
Мгм.
Ми приймаємо статті англійською мовою.
Так, також. Тобто всі журнали, які у нас є в Україні, all magazines, all journals,
Thank you.
are open for you, really. No, especially Doxa as some motherland and alma mater. Thank you so much for all, and have a nice evening, have a nice, peaceful evening, morning, and day, and continue to our communication. Bye.
Thank you for
Bye,
organization.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Максим, ти можеш залишитись, так, трошки?
Oh, okay. Да. Okay, залишиться, yeah.
Так. Розумієш, так? Ну що,
Понимаю.